If you've been living under a rock recently to save money on rent, GitHub is a website that's a lot like Google Drive, but it stores code instead of your middle school English papers. But it also has a couple of other properties. It's a social media that, kind of like LinkedIn, is targeted at work. And you basically use it to flex that you stay inside more than other people do. Then it's got kind of a MySpace style like pin board where you put all your top projects. And by top projects, I mean projects that nobody uses or nobody ever will use, but for some reason they have 2 or 3 stars because you got your friends to star them. And stars are just for the rock people. They're like likes, but they're a lot rarer. They're a lot harder to get because it's a smaller social media. So the other component is you've got like a bio, and people put really crazy like images and widgets and whatnot that show all the programming languages they claim to know and what try-hard editor they're using to write code. And the reason people do all this is so that they can get hired at some company that's paying like more than the rock wages. So, how do you trick the communications degree people in the hiring office into choosing you based on your GitHub profile? Well, you need some projects, and there's an easy way to farm kind of noteworthy looking projects. So, you're going to pick like a trendy language. I think king of that right now is Rust, but Zig is also a good example, and certain web frameworks like Astro or Svelte. Basically, go on Fireship, the YouTube channel, and sort by popular, and then just pick whatever that is. And so once you get your language, you got to pick like an easy to replicate tool that everyone already uses, and then remake it in the language. Change the branding just a little bit. Mostly focus on branding. Like you barely need to know the language. It can be a shitty project because no one is going to use it. And then you just got to spam that on Reddit and just try to generate hype. And that'll get you to an okay amount of stars. And that's all you really need compared to like a lot of people's profiles. I mean, legitimacy, certain areas also are easier to get traction in and easier to get stars in. If you pick a very niche community for a small library or a new up and coming thing and you build some plugin for it that solves a very specific issue, that's a way to actually contribute and get some stars, as opposed to just spamming kind of useless projects. Some examples of communities like this are the NeoVim community, although that's ripe with useless plugins, but that's kind of got a low barrier to entry, and it's got a churning new community of people who barely know what they're doing. The typed community is pretty solid. You can make like a template, and as long as it looks half decent, a bunch of people will just throw stars at you. Rust, a little more difficult, I would say, but still pretty easy. And you might say, well, this all feels kind of unethical and kind of half-baked. And I would say, yeah. There is another more legitimate strategy, and that's to contribute to other people's open source projects. And the best way to do that is find low barrier to entry projects that need help with things like translation or just typo fixing, like the really easy stuff. And that way, over time, if you're consistent with it, you'll start to rack up those achievements and those staying inside points. And it'll look really impressive, and you're actually doing some good in the world. And one thing to remember through all this is it's all arbitrary and it's all internet points. So you should focus on improving your ability to code and not what other people think of your projects on the internet. You shouldn't just do things. You shouldn't just make content for the sake of getting more GitHub stars and followers. My GitHub link is in the description, by the way. Thanks for watching.